Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
Focus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. In a historic move, the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis has passed the much-anticipated Plastic Waste Reduction Bill 2025. The landmark piece of legislation marks a decisive step in regulating and limiting the sale and distribution of single-use plastics, aiming to protect our marine life, terrestrial ecosystems, and the health of our communities. Now, we'll take a closer look at the details of this new legislation today. In addition, we'll explore the key outcomes from last week's Green Climate Fund Regional Dialogue, and we'll share what we can look forward to at the upcoming Global Sustainable Island Summit in May. With us today to discuss these matters is the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke, Minister responsible for the environment and climate action. The Minister is supported by Colincia Levine, Permanent Secretary in the said ministry. Stay with us for InFocus, your government, your business. Welcome back to InFocus, and allow me now to welcome back with us here today would be the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke. Of course, Dr. Clarke, you are no stranger. You were here the last time in November, and certainly it's great to have you back.
Yes, thank you, and thank you so much for having us again.
And Ms. Levine, you actually were supposed to be with the Minister the last time when she was here, but you were able to make it this time around, and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So let's jump right into it, because there's a lot that we have to discuss as we established from the beginning, and persons who are looking at this live on Facebook or the replay on ZIZ television as well, they would have seen during our break some of the plastic waste that has accumulated at the landfill over at Connery. Now, Minister, as we mentioned with the presentation in the National Assembly of the Plastic Waste Reduction Bill, you stated that the Parliament was focused on protecting people, protecting the Federation and indeed the planet, and also protecting livelihoods. How does the recently passed bill and now an act, as it's being gazetted and will be ascended to the Governor General, how does that achieve this new piece of legislation? How does it achieve these three things?
Thank you for that question, and I think it would be important for me to start by reminding the Federation that on the 31st of March, which is just 4 days away, plastic, single-use T-shirt plastic bags will be officially banned in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis from being distributed. Now, the challenge that we're having with single-use plastics in particular is the proliferation of that particular item, and especially in our landfill site. The tests that we have done in terms of types of waste at the landfill suggest to us that the majority of it is plastic, and you know, plastics, its origin is fossil fuel based. I reference here even the landfill fire that we had just 2 weeks ago that was very difficult to put out because it's basically oil that's burning.
And it's underground.
Right. And that is a result of landfills, especially when they're in their end stage. And I've said many times that the landfill has reached its last phase. We have to transition what we're doing. Now, the bill helps us in the sense that it protects St. Kitts and Nevis environmentally, no more importation of single-use plastic bags. No additional waste to deal with. What's here is what we're going to try and manage. In terms of the planet, the presentation also made a link to the harmful impact of plastics on marine life. Oceanic plastic waste is particularly problematic for coastal island nations. And I explained that because we're coastal, we're sloping island, a lot of the waste that's upland makes its way to the ocean via our guts. Rainfall through the guts gets to the ocean. Some of it will then beach on another coast. That's where a lot of the plastic that's on our coast isn't originating from St. Kitts and Nevis, but a lot of them will float. And when they float for years, and then they eventually make their way to what we call the oceanic, a circular system. It's the plastic waste trap. What was just one gigantic waste trap 5-10 years ago is now 5. These plastic items break down into microplastics, which are then absorbed by marine life, and we are a fish-eating population. We then eat them, eat the fish, and it causes us a lot of serious challenges, including cancer-related diseases. Prime Minister, in his support of the bill, did take some time to go through a list of diseases that are caused by excess exposure and consumption of inadvertent consumption of plastic.
And of course, that would be based on
microplastics.
his background as a medical doctor.
Indeed, indeed. And it was shocking. In fact, when I got home, my father said, best presentation by the Prime Minister. I was like, I was presenting too, you know, Dad. He was like, yeah, you were good, but the Prime Minister was like on point, like the medical background, connecting it to people, planet, and livelihoods was really good. And in doing so, we're saving our environment, we're saving our bodies. And of course, with livelihoods, the transition from single-use plastics to biodegradable material, it is an increased cost for all persons, not just the consumer, but the retailer or the wholesaler. But we recognize that transitioning to green, while at the upfront it's more expensive, eventually becomes more cost effective for businesses. And that's what we're attempting to achieve here.
Well, you also mentioned the circular economy, and of course it would be pillar 6 within the Sustainable Island State agenda that the government has set forward. Can you explain the concept of the circular economy?
Definitely. So the circular economy is based on the principle of reusing, reducing, and recycling. Essentially, it's a system that's no longer linear. We have a linear system where we purchase, we use, we dispose of at the landfill, and then we have to deal with it. And we're saying here, you purchase less, purchase better and more durable items, you reuse, upcycle, recycle, you gift anything, or what is then taken and recycled is then turned into something else that can create a livelihood opportunity for persons. And I mentioned, I think I used the option of the scrap metal from the landfill. Currently, it's just separated on the landfill. However, in many countries, it is a valuable item that's used for manufacturing in other sectors. So the circular economy is intended to provide options, especially in the informal sector, for persons to ply their trade and their livelihoods.
Is that an option, the recycling of the scrap metal for us here in St.
Of
Kitts and
course.
Nevis?
Of course, we have companies who have reached out to us and have asked to collect the scrap metal. But what's always a challenge for St. Kitts and Nevis? Because we're so small, size matters. But as we have said, and you've heard Minister Maynard in his presentation of what's possible for St. Kitts and Nevis, size is also a benefit. We can be a great sustainable model. We need only to separate our waste, find the right market, and continuously ship.
Ms. Levine, perhaps you can jump in and talk to us a bit about how the message of reduce, reuse, and recycle is being communicated to the public and ensuring that public buy-in.
Well, the Department of Environment, who has been lead on this venture, has been extremely active, and they've spanned the entire country from schools to stakeholders on the ground, foot patrols through our communities. They've been out there. We've also had a rigorous social media campaign where we've been spreading the word there, and we've been having a radio tour. So we've been trying to cover all the bases, ensuring that people know what's happening, are informed and engaged, so that we too are fielding their questions and their concerns and able to have that holistic approach to what's going on.
So the groundwork was laid for banning single-use plastics in St. Kitts and Nevis. Why was this the right time to introduce the plastic waste reduction bill?
I think it's always been the right time. It's just that now, in this particular context, we have a minister who is extremely passionate. We have a department who is also following her lead, and the stars have just aligned. We've done the work, and we've gotten it to the cabinet on time.
Minister?
Correct. I think yesterday in our stakeholder consultation, I said to the gathering there that the presentation of the single-use plastic ban, that I wasn't doing that just as a minister or a member of cabinet or a parliamentarian. I was doing it as an environmental advocate, and this is something that I've grown up on from birth, really, because you grew up with your grandmother. We recycle everything, you reuse everything. You're not rich, you're gonna make ends meet, you're gonna protect your environment, you're gonna take care of the plants, the bush, every single thing. So it's in me. But it's not only that. I also am a retailer. I mean, a consumer. I go to the supermarket. I go to the restaurants. I purchase on the side of the road and recognize, and I drive. And you see the garbage, you know the challenges, you understand that. If you have family members who work in tourism, in the tourism industry, their livelihoods is deeply connected to a clean environment. If we don't clean the environment, they don't have a job. And everybody has to recognize that to get to this point, all of St. Kitts had to align. The retailers were ready, the wholesalers were ready, the supermarkets were ready, the cabinet, when we presented it, go ahead. And we're like, no, we're gonna just do a little bit more consultation. When we got into office in 2022, we could have passed the bill the next month because there was already 2 years of consultation. But because we have a good governance agenda, let's make sure let's shore up every part of this consultation process. We did it again for 2 more years, and here we are. People have been ready, as PS has mentioned.
And to add, when we came back around to the stakeholders this time around, they literally were saying to us, we're ready, it's time, let's go. And so taking the bill to Parliament was not just a ministry endeavor. We had the community, we had St. Kitts behind us. They were ready.
St. Kitts and Nevis, of course.
St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right. And so that's consultation, because of course you would imagine that the larger companies, let's say the supermarket retailers and persons who would be able to do large sales, selling and buying as well, so that while they may be on board, what about the vendors on the street? What about the man who is on the corner doing barbecue?
Mm-hmm. So yesterday in the consultation, the baking bread industry, bread makers, they did raise a significant point to us, and that's not being part of the initial conversation. And we admitted that we focused primarily on the larger retailers who were the source of the major source of distribution of the plastic bags. The bakery, they do give you a plastic bag, but we're not banning the bread bags. We're banning the T-shirt bags. But it was an oversight. But they showed up to the conversation and they outlined what their challenges would be and the direct impact it would have on their consumers. So every time we have another consultation, which brings me back to the point, spending 2 more years to talk a little bit more. Every time we have a conversation, you find another group that needs special attention or special focus or an adjusted approach. And that's what we're doing. And we recognize that let's say the obvious sellers, the persons who sell food produce on the side of the road who offer you a bag, that's going to become a problem. But they also have to make the shift. Would we be able to police every single type of vendor here in St. Kitts and Nevis? No, we will not. And that's where we need support, not just from the retailers and the wholesalers, but we need support from every single consumer to walk with your own bag. And we imagine that that might be the hardest part of the transition. And that's why we're working with this small business unit to ensure that their transition is manageable. They don't feel any squeeze that a larger retailer wouldn't.
Right. Okay. Now let's go back to Parliament and the bill itself. Now, of course, it was passed in the National Assembly, as we mentioned, on Friday, and it was done so with bipartisan support. Can you speak to the importance of having persons from both sides of the aisle support this bill?
Certainly. So, why wouldn't they? That's my that's my initial response. What would be the opposition? You want to protect the environment, right? We did not anticipate at any point in time that any parliamentarian would oppose the bill. What we expected, just like when we passed the SIP Community Beautification and Safety Bill, that if we missed something, parliamentarian would tell us, let's consider this, which we did. Similarly, I think Minister Evelyn, who was the minister responsible for this plastic transition before I assumed this post, led this program, pointed out some language that we needed to adjust to ensure there wasn't any ambiguity. Now, the importance of having both sides of the parliament support, at least for the members who always show up, is that the nation can see that the parliament is fully on board. And that collective support then says to them, this is not a PAM and CCM thing or a Labour PAM thing or anything. This is a country thing. This is country above self, protecting our environment, protecting people, and we're doing it together. And this is real leadership and political will. And this is demonstrative of how we're attaining sustainability and transitioning to sustainability on energy, on food security. St. Kitts can't be good and Nevis bad. It wouldn't make sense. Labour can't be good and PAM bad. It wouldn't make sense. So everybody has to be on board with the single-use transition. Everybody is going to be affected in some way, and so everybody can support the transition.
I think to add, it shows that we're not just talking sustainable island state, but that we're actually poised to realize and live that sustainable island state vision. And one of the things that inspired me most about this ministry was the extended hand across to Minister Maynard at the Ministry of Energy. And where you have in other countries the Ministry of Energy in a combative scenario with the Ministry of Environment, you have here in St. Kitts and Nevis harmony, where they're working together. And I think this has transcended to the whole of government where the environment agenda is concerned, where we're all singing one voice and leading the people unanimously towards that vision that we keep talking about. So it was for me an example of walking the walk.
Okay, so for persons who still may not be aware, we want to revisit the timeline of this ban and how it's going to be rolled out across St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay, so let me get that exact sheet.
Yes, because we don't want to
not make any error.
Date.
And
But
they have that.
you do know the first ban is the 31st.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay, so phase 1, importation is effective December 31st, and the distribution will be effective March 31st. That's coming up.
So, and that would be of the t-shirt plastic bags.
The t-shirt
Yeah.
plastic bags.
Right.
Then phase 2 will be styrofoam containers and plastic straws. The importation will be April 30th, while the distribution July 31st. Phase 3, single-use plastic cups, plates, and utensils. The importation will be banned on August 31st, where the distribution will be banned on November 30th. So, and again, we took a phased approach, recognizing that it's new. and its behavioral change, and that we are going to be affected. And so, as to not be overwhelming or burdensome, we chose to take this phased approach so that we can, as we're going along, measure, adjust, make changes if needed, while scaffolding the people.
And it's interesting to point out, Minister, that of course, while it is new and encouraging behavioral change here in St. Kitts and Nevis, our sisters and brothers across the OACS, many of them, and even CARICOM, have already made that shift.
Yes, indeed, Aaron, they did. I think I was at a regional waste management meeting. I stepped into the room and the conversation was about managing waste and biodegradable waste, compostable waste. Nobody was talking about plastics. And I turned to someone and said, why isn't anyone talking about plastic? They was like, we've all banned single-use plastics except you. I said, oh, I will not be back at this meeting. And I have not been since 2022 until this ban is done, because we have an obligation not just to our national agenda, but to our regional agenda with the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, and to our wider regional agenda, which is CARICOM. And everybody has done this. I'm not saying because they did it, we do it, but there was a commitment that preceded my leadership. There is a commitment to protecting our region, knowing its vulnerable state. And we have to deal with this triple planetary crisis, which is climate change, biodiversity loss, and plastic pollution, and they're all interconnected. St. Kitts and Nevis has to do its part.
And to add, one of the thrusts in the environmental world is increased ambition. And as the Minister said, we are party to a number of treaties and international conventions, and we have to do our part. And at the Ministry, one of our focuses is that constituent empowerment and bringing the people along. And we have to ensure that the work of the Ministry doesn't stay at a technical level, but filters down to the people. And one of the ways that St. Kitts can demonstrate its increased ambition where environmental matters are concerned is with the ban, and is taking it into the homes of people where you're changing your behavior towards ones that will foster environmental stewardship. And so it's a demonstration and an indication to the international world that we are serious about walking the walk.
How can you be a sustainable island state with a plastic bag blowing around on the ground? How can you be a country that received the best dive destination for several years when you're underwater and you see plastic bags circling around?
How can you be a sustainable destination and you dump your garbage at the Independence Square, which is in the heart of town, which is a central meeting point for many of our cruise passengers? That's what we should ask ourselves. And that's why what P.S. mentioned about behavioral change is so critical.
And we have to, what we do at the Ministry has to touch the lives of the people. They have to feel, they have to be a part, and bans affect. And as Minister said, and as you mentioned, plastics are cross-cutting. They affect every part of our economy, and we often struggle to connect what's going on in other ministries to what's happening in ours, but plastics, from the start to the end of its life cycle, it touches every single ministry. And so it's a good example of interconnectedness and how, it's all a circle.
So how then will this new legislation, how do you expect that it's going to impact local businesses?
So I'll probably start with the intended support from the government of Canada, which has provided us the opportunity to conduct what we call a cost-benefit analysis to determine which demographic has been impacted the most by the plastic ban. And that's something that we're actively pursuing. The challenges that we expect, let's say the small businesses, the chicken and chips shop, the small, like a little tuck shop that in the community that sells stuff. We expect it to be more challenging because you have to now switch to biodegradable options, but that's not what we're immediately promoting. Even within our phase, we're promoting the use of reusable shopping bags. Nobody in St. Kitts and Nevis can say they don't have a reusable shopping bags. They are given away dime a dozen at events. They are all over. And what we're asking retailers, consumers to do, bring your own bag. bring BYOB, BYOB to the chicken place, BYOB to the supermarket, BYOB to the corner shop, BYOB when you go and buy your vegetables at the market because they don't have the plastic bags to give to you. And in time, we expect the transition. We don't expect that April 1st, people are going to be like, all plastic gone. We don't expect that in a corner shop right on a back road somewhere where nobody's going to police that they are going to just dump all of their plastic bags. But with time, the informed shopper who goes and say, you know, you ain't really supposed to be giving out these plastic bags, make people bring their own bag. And every time a vendor gets told, no, I have my own bag, eventually provision of the bag would not be necessary. So we expect a key part of this legislation which can oftentimes be seen as punitive and enforcement, policy and behavior change. It's collaborative, it's let's do this together, it's raising awareness, it's educational, it's I'm going to make the right choice today. And that's what we expect for them to work hand in hand. Don't expect to see no police going around saying, hey, you're using a plastic bag. Police yourself. And the only way the general population would police itself is if the Ministry of Environment continues to do the raising the awareness, sharing the information, challenging the norms of plastic bags, going into the schools with the youngest generation to say, in 5 years, they will not accept plastic bags anywhere. They might not even accept plastic bottles. And that's what I want from the generation. So we deal with the single-use t-shirt bags, they're gonna come on board with the plastic bottles. And all of the vendors will start bottling their water in cans and paper boxes.
I think too that businesses are afforded an opportunity as a result of this ban, where they have an opportunity to examine the type of business that they are and the type of relationship they want to have with their consumers. At the consultation yesterday, I would have admonished the business owners to give the people a chance. We are your partners, and I even was able to go around the room and just give a little bit of the different feelings associated with each business place and how I smile when I think of this business versus this business, and call on your people, call on your patrons to rise to the occasion and to become this steward in a demonstrative way, not just in your heart. And so I think the business community is being poised to transition to a new model, transition to a newer mindset, rebrand, and engage its customers in an elevated way.
It's a scenario that just came to mind, and I wanted to ask, because of course I mentioned at the top the sale and distribution of single-use plastics, but importation, and you mentioned it during the ban as well to the timeline, that importation is something that is also included. They're not going to be able to import it. What about travelers, especially from overseas? When you travel, sometimes you put your shoes in a plastic bag and you go through customs. What's going to happen there?
Well, this ties to the intersectoral nature of the work of the ministry and what we're doing. Stakeholders are on board, and you would be surprised. Travelers use less plastics than us. Travelers use less plastic than us, and I don't think it would be odd for a customs officer to engage a passenger and said, you know, here in St. Kitts, we are stewards of the environment and this is not okay. And I strongly doubt that there would be much pushback from travelers. I shared the story of the fact that in my suitcases at all times are several reusable bags tucked everywhere because I know I'm not buying another one because I have so many and it's not allowed. And so again, I would flip the question to the fact that we are behind. We are behind, and it's an opportunity for us to elevate. And I actually challenge the customs officers when they're doing their searches to see if they find plastic bags and to be inspired by the fact that, you know, we're catching on to an international trend. That's a good thing for us.
Okay. Support for businesses, any from the government?
Yes, of course. And we started by recognizing, I think somewhere in the papers, we have the difference in the cost of the plastic bag. Well, when we do the consultation, we always share with the participants that we understand that the biodegradable options, the paper options, the cotton, the jute, the hemp, they're pricier than the plastic option. As such, we followed the Caribbean model and we did a full assessment of what was done across the region to provide tax incentives to importers. And that model was presented to customs, to finance. We did, I don't want to call the technical name, but the Asicuda system, where you go in and you look at what comes in, how much you make, the codes, to change them. Quite a bit of work to get to the point of what we would offer in terms of duty-free concessions for persons importing these biodegradable and paper-based options. So they are there. We are starting phase by phase with the first 6 months, which ends in June, and we continue, but we have a full 2-year approach to provide people concessions on the items.
And to administer, and just to shout out, we had the support of our UN country coordinator, Cosbert Woods, helping us, given his background in trade and the fact that, again, other countries have done this, and he has worked in that transition to help to guide us to ensure that we are informed as we take this step.
Right, and as you mentioned in terms of the United Nations, Minister, you mentioned support from Canada as well. So it was a question that I did intend to ask in terms of the lack of support now from the USAID program. That's no longer available at this time. Are there other partners that the government intends to engage to support these initiatives?
Well, the USA didn't support any of our programs at the Ministry of Environment, thankfully. So we are not impacted, but we are feeling the burden of and sharing collectively the burden of other programs which are affected by the US's new position as it relates to environment and climate options and even funding and development aid. The good thing is that there isn't only one partner globally, and as one step away, 5 more will replace them, and that gap will be filled. The INC, which is the International Treaty for Plastic Negotiations, will continue in August, and our technical team from the Bureau of Standards and the Department of Environment will continue on the negotiations, and the Government of Canada, Guilbeault, the Minister of Environment there, the network that we have been a part of continues to function, minus the absence of a shift in geopolitics. It will continue because we only have one Earth, and many other countries are aware of that.
Right, and of course that also impacts the participation in the Conference of Parties as well, so that takes place annually. All right, so Minister, let me come back locally now and talk to us about, because as you mentioned, the extensive consultation that took place. You mentioned that the bakeries were omitted as a bit of a oversight initially. Is there an opportunity for persons to, I wouldn't necessarily want to use the word appeal, but to register their concerns, to share alternative ways that can be done, so that maybe there can be an extension in a ban for the deadline or something like that? Is there a system for that?
Long and short, no, there will be no extension. Yes, every consultation affords an opportunity for sharing what your challenges are. Out of the intervention from the Island Bakeries, I think it was, we are going to have a conversation crafted just for them and their relationship with Montserrat Plastics, who is the primary producer of plastic goods to many of the local shops and the bakeries. So we're going to talk to them and even more.
Just to clarify a bit, not negating any accountability on our side, right? But we focused on Montserrat Plastics, who we know was a major provider of plastics to the local community. And we hoped that that engagement would trickle down. And so it wasn't that they were never considered, and it's not that now that we provided consultations that they came forward and said, you know, we want to sit face to face. So we are open. We acknowledge that we could have given them that face to face in the first instance, but it's just a matter of approach, which we're open to amending. So it wasn't that we didn't think of them, and you know, we're looking forward to engaging them. We have a consultation coming up on Friday. We had one this week, yesterday, and so the department is open to the conversation, and I don't want anyone to feel like they weren't considered.
No.
Because again, approach, and we're open to shifting and adjusting given what has come forward.
Correct. And one of our main partners was our grouping that we interfaced with was the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, which represents a wide cross section of persons in that sector. So we are every time affording the opportunity to converse, but what we cannot do is extend any of the bans. Note, in some countries, I'll not call any names, today we decide that there is a ban, and next week, don't bring anything else here. We looked at the various approaches across the region, and we ensured that no matter what was done, St. Kitts and Nevis had to craft its own approach to the ban. So some may even look at ours and say that model is too long, that model is too expensive, that model is too consultative because it requires too much adjustment on the part of the government. But we prefer this because you want to hear from the people. You want to adjust, you want to pivot, but we will not change the dates.
Right. Okay. And we're already at the bottom of the hour, and so we've already gone a bit over in terms of the time to discuss this, but I think it's important to have this discussion, of course, as it impacts everybody, as you mentioned. And so the final question that I'll ask is in terms of the penalties. Now, you mentioned that there'll be no police officers hiding around the corner or going into shops with the SSU breaking in to see if you have a plastic bag. But what about for individuals and persons who seek to import or to deliberately deceive the system, who continue to sell single-use plastic bags?
In the
Do
first,
they even sell them? No way.
In terms of penalties, in the first instance, it's a fine of $3,000, and in the second instance, $15,000. But we're not going to have to enact any of that because no one is going to break the law where this is concerned.
We don't expect it. As I said, behavioral change in partnership with enforcement and legislation. And I think yesterday I also mentioned to the stakeholders that the cost of this transition is not borne only by the wholesalers and retailers. The government, 2 years of consultation, has a budget. A budget that Ministry of Finance isn't accustomed to seeing from the Ministry of Environment because it's mostly been a policy, in practice field work. Now we're saying we have to, I feel like SKNIS and the Ministry of Environment, we're like the best buddies because we're always asking for support, we're always here, we're always talking. And it's because we want it to be a behavioral change model, not a punitive before the court spending $3,500. And I know that the cost could have been $500, but the illegal dumping cost is $500, and look at the experience we have. So the next adjustment will be upwards to $5,000 for illegal dumping.
Right, and certainly we would love to have that conversation when the time comes.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to talk a bit now about the international partners that the ministry has, and we touched on it a bit earlier in terms of Canada and the United States, but we're going to take a break first, and persons who are looking at us on television will be able to see some photos from the recent Green Climate Fund regional dialogue that was held here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we're going to take a break at this time. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke, the Minister responsible for the Environment and Climate Action, and her Permanent Secretary, Colincia Levine. And we are talking about, of course, the single-use plastic ban, but now we're going to shift it a bit more to the engagement that we've had in St. Kitts and Nevis with regional and international partners. Now, Last week, Minister, we would have seen St. Kitts and Nevis host the Green Climate Fund Regional Dialogue, and that was held from March 17 to 20 at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort. It was held under the theme Towards the Resilient Caribbean, Advancing Regional Solutions for Climate Action, Sustainable Growth and Inclusive Development. What does it mean for St. Kitts and Nevis to have hosted this important dialogue?
That's such an important question. We have become a buzz point, not just for tourism, but for conversations on sustainability, climate resilience, and that's because of our demonstration of our ambition and our intentions to transition. It's because we have the head of state, the Prime Minister, who immediately decided that sustainability was going to be our international cry. That when we showed up at COP28 in Dubai on an international stage with the former vice president, with the head of International Fund, with the head of the climate, the UNFCCC, said St. Kitts and Nevis is not looking for handouts, but we're looking for partnership. And people took the Prime Minister seriously, and naturally it meant that the ministry had some work to do. And since then, and even before, we have been working to ensure that St. Kitts meant what it said when we want to transition to a sustainable island state. We want to be climate resilient, we want to raise our ambition, we want to adjust everything that we need to adjust to ensure that the world takes us seriously. And this is the result. The Green Climate Fund is not going to pack up and come to St. Kitts and Nevis on a whim. It's what are they doing? How are they performing with their readiness, access their grants? How are they adjusting their legislation? How are they looking at policies to incorporate people and livelihoods and protect the environment? And all of that led to we are coming to St. Kitts and Nevis to have a conversation. How is their ambition on energy transition and geothermal? And you know where we are with that. And they came. So it's a key win for conference tourism, for tourism in and of itself, because if you come to St. Kitts for a 4-day meeting, you are going to a bar. I left one of the meetings and someone said to me, Dr. Clarke, what should I do with my evening? I said, have you been to the Strip? Yes. Have you been to the beach? Yes. Have you been to Carambola? Yes. Have you been to Reggae Beach? No. Go to Reggae Beach. And tomorrow go down to Brimstone Hill. This is a scientist who has spent his 8 hours in the conference and then is going to spend 4 hours patronizing our local spots. So it was a lot. And then they got to see key projects, in particular the geothermal project on Nevis, jointly with Premier Brantley and Minister Maynard, the head of the Green Climate Fund, the international head, impressed by not only our commitment, but the political will and the efforts of NEVLEC, SKLEC, and regional partners. It was a big win.
I'm going to answer slightly different and say that they came because of our minister. I'm going to say that. When the minister travels, it's something to see. She's on every panel, she's in every dialogue, she's at every pavilion, and it's paying off. The international community is responding, and because she walks the walk, they want to come and see firsthand what's going on. We have a summit coming up, Global Sustainable Island Summit, and again, because of the minister being out there on the tarmac doing her part, they want to come and see what is this about. Sometimes when we go to places, I'm not going to say they don't know where St. Kitts is, but who is this young lady on all of these panels? What's going on there? And so they're coming to see, and that's why, to tie it to the ban, we have to put these measures in place so that we are a sustainable island state and not just saying it and talking about it. And as we shift our behaviors, conferences and engaging international partners in this way will become part and parcel. And I look forward to the day when we can hold a big UN climate conference. We may not have the space, but that's a hope, and it's about that accelerated ambition. And Minister, is that the work that we're doing is about that accelerated vision, and the international world wants to see.
It's an interesting point that you mentioned. Last week, the minister responsible for energy, the Honorable Congress Maynard, was here, and he did speak a bit on the fact that they were having the GCF here, and that it's all a part as a result of the engagement that has been made with the international community, the participation in international conferences, and being able to lead the way in the Caribbean in terms of the sustainable transition that we are undertaking here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we see how it ties in and how it continues to pay off. But let's shift our attention then, Minister, to some of the key messages that were communicated during the GCF. And Ms. of course, Levine mentioned the GCIS, which I want to touch on a bit. We're running out of time. So let's just talk a bit briefly about the outcomes from GCF.
I think one of the biggest outcomes was that Prime Minister Motley joined Prime Minister Drew at the panel. That was just like big win.
And that will be from Barbados.
From Barbados. Prime Minister Motley is a global champion for small island developing states with the Bridgetown Initiative, and she came for that opening day to deliver a key I don't want to say a directive, but a very inspired call for action that as a region we needed to work towards a debt for climate swap, logistics and transportation, interregional logistics and transportation, and an energy framework for cooperation in the Caribbean. And the entire conference agreed. Prime Minister Drew buffered that with the need for political will to demonstrate that these types of corporations are possible. And of course, Minister Maynard and I completed the conversation after that high-level segment with all of the regional partners in GCF. And for me, that was one of the main outcomes, outside of a very detailed agenda about access and partnership and climate finance and giving our local bodies, the credit union, the St. Kitts Cooperative Credit Union, the Development Bank, and our NGOs a space, and Clarence Fitzroy College, to access GCF financing. A major win was that meeting that was hosted by Minister Maynard, because the Green Climate Fund regional director said that was the first time she saw every single regional partner, OECS, CARICOM, CDF, CDB, ECCB, every 5 Cs, everybody was in that room, a room of 20, with our minister talking about a regional framework for energy, making a green print as he presented to the OECS ministers of energy, as he is now the chair of the council, a green print for energy transition, so that we don't if and but. So if administrations change in some other country, definitely not in St. Kitts and Nevis, that the new administration doesn't have to try and figure out and start over. We are doing geothermal. We will continue doing geothermal for the next 20 years until it's done. If you are doing energy and solar PV, you will continue regardless of administrative shifts. But that was the main outcome, because for GCF, it represented practical on-the-ground implementation of climate finance.
And persons who may have missed that interview with Minister Maynard, I would encourage them to go back on YouTube and watch it, because he did also outline the green print, and it was very informative and something certainly persons need to be aware of, and how St. Kitts and Nevis is once again taking the stage internationally and leading in this regard. Now, it was mentioned by Prime Minister Dr. Terence Struth that St. Kitts and Nevis had the least support thus far among Caribbean nations from GCF. Can you give us a sense as to what the challenges may have been in the past, and what strategies are there to increase this funding?
I will say, let me go back to one of my bilat notes with the 5 Cs, that Prime Minister is correct that we have accessed the least, but since 2022, our access has tripled, because, not just because we're aggressively going after finance, you have to show up in a space. You cannot stay in St. Kitts and Nevis and expect the world to say, send some money to St. Kitts and Nevis. Prime Minister Motley got millions for water adaptation in Barbados. Do you think she did that from Barbados? She did not. You show up, you lobby, you change systems, you negotiate, and you said this is why it needs to be done, because this is our experience here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And you top that off by saying, come to our islands to visit. So we walk in the walk. We went, We said, yeah, okay, everything has shifted. You understand the special circumstances of SIDS. You understand the circumstances of island nations. Please come and see. And come here and dialogue and know that we're going to put the project officers in place. We're going to set up the meetings. You're going to have a minister who's not only going to lobby internationally, she's going to lobby in the budget. She's going to lobby in the cabinet. And then she's going to bring other ministries on board. So environment isn't out here waving our hands alone. We're here with energy and water and tourism and sustainable development and legal and foreign affairs, because coordination of the approach to ensure Prime Minister's vision of sustainability, the Cabinet's vision of sustainability, your vision as media and journalism of sustainability, your son's vision of sustainability, my mother's vision of sustainability, my brother's vision of sustainability, some school child's vision of sustainability works.
Okay, let's shift our attention to the upcoming summit, which will be the Global Sustainable Islands Summit, and we have just about some 10 minutes left. It's scheduled for May 27th to 29th. Now, organizers have dubbed it as the most ambitious iteration of the annual event. Why? What makes it so ambitious?
St. Kitts and Nevis. It's St. Kitts and Nevis, so we don't do anything small.
So what can they look forward to?
P.S.
To answer your initial question, it is in part, again, because of the efforts of Minister. Not because she's my boss, but giving kudos where they are due. We went to the Global Sustainable Island Summit in the past, and Minister said, we can do this, and we will do it, and we are doing it, and we welcome all to come and see the walk. Come and see what St. Kitts is doing, what we need to continue doing, and where we need to go. Come and see who in the region, who in the international space can help us. Come and learn what's going on so you can appreciate what you have and see what areas you need to develop in. It is what it's called, the Global Sustainable Island Summit. This is where we're going, and it's another tangible opportunity for people to come, touch, feel, see, hear, smell, engage. If you have questions, they can be answered. If you want to know how you can partner, how you can help, how you can build, it's going to be happening there. And so we put out a call to everyone to keep their ears out as we put our content in the media. As you said, 27th to 29th.
Oh, just before you add, just before she adds the dates, I also want to say, in terms of believing that you can do something and positioning yourself to do so. We participated, Foreign Minister, myself, Prime Minister, in their virtual sessions when we got in 2022. And I think this was thanks to Mr. Eustace Wallace, Minister Councillor. He was then at the time serving in Canada, who said, you all should do this. And we took the recommendation, and of course I'm like, PM, you need to do this. And he did take it. And then we went to our COPs and we participated. So we've been on this journey with island innovation for quite some time. But sometimes to really check that last checkbox, you need the big wigs. And we said to Prime Minister, we need you for 2 weeks. And he said, that's a lot of time. And I said, Prime Minister, I promise you, if you devote 2 weeks to the Ministry of Sustainable Development, it will be worth your while. And the Prime Minister, PM Drew, gave us 2 weeks, and we went to the Prince Edward Island to participate in the summit. We went then to SIDS conference, and then we added on some more weeks for another conference, and that was the end of it. Prime Minister said, yes, let's have a Global Sustainable Island Summit right here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And that was it for us, the belief that it could be done. But we started from the granular, and we got to the point of people are now coming here to St. Kitts and Nevis. They saw not just our own ambition, but when a head of state is fully on board with a vision for sustainability and climate resilience, the world will follow.
Right, that's actually very important in terms of the political will. Right, Ms. Levine?
If there's anybody who is engaged in any form of sustainable action, they're welcome to reach out to the ministry. Our lead coordinator is Ms. Sharon Rattan. I don't know who doesn't know who that is, but if you see her on the street, you stop her and you let her know, I want to participate in the Sustainable Island State Summit. I am a part of the change that's happening. I want to be at the summit. whether it's as a guest or as a participant, you flag her down and join us from the 27th to the 29th of May at the Marriott for our Global Sustainable Island State Summit in collaboration with Island Innovation.
So persons can participate how? Do they have to register at the ministry or?
So there are four options for participation. The 24th to the 27th, we're having a global youth forum. We expect 200, correct me if I miss anything, 200 young persons globally and locally to participate. Additionally, on the 27th, the Geothermal Summit that will be hosted by Premier Brantley and Minister Maynard. That will be on the island of Nevis. And then we're going to have the 2.5 days of our summit at St. Kitts Marriott. Of course, we're going to have a sustainability spotlight at the Eco Park. And because we're building in tourism into this conference, you're journeying to Eco Park via the Scenic Railway, who we're also going to partner with to the partnership has already started because they're taking us to the Eco Park. Importantly, because St. Kitts and Nevis has been longest friends with the Republic of China and Taiwan.
Republic of China, Taiwan.
Republic of China, Taiwan,
right.
Sorry, thank you. The Eco Park feature will show their journey with us in terms of sustainability. You can't drive anywhere in St. Kitts and not see, or Nevis, and not see the fruits of the partnership and the transition for sustainability. And we continue on the 30th with a sub-regions forum, and that would be hosted in part with Anguilla, etc. These Anguilla, hosted by Premier Brantley again, Nevis, Anguilla, and other jurisdictions about their own access to climate finance.
So how do you envision the impact of this summit now on St. Kitts and Nevis?
Vision? I don't even have to vision. It's going to be so big. The fact that 300 plus persons locally and regionally and internationally will convene here. The fact that they're going to be doing not just in-house conference, but seeing St. Kitts and Nevis. The fact that St. Kitts and Nevis is showing up again, as we did for GCF, as one federation, 2 islands, 1 federation, hosting a major conference that our young persons will be participating, that we're working with Climate Smart Accelerator on a hydroponic
system at Eco Park that can be taken into your backyard, into your classroom, and have you grow sustainable plants.
And the fact that the Eco Park feature, the sustainability spotlight, will also be the opportunity for us to showcase again what we call milestone 3 of our sustainable island state agenda to expected regional heads and institutional heads. It's 4 intense days, but it's 4 days that every ministry, every sector, the private sector, all our partners get to talk sustainability, not just amongst ourselves, but with the entire world. And Island Innovation, James Ellsmore and his team have been great partners and tremendous help in terms of getting this out to the global network. We're going to start our own local campaign in about a week. I know many persons have said to us that we haven't heard about it yet, but we were strategic. We needed to do GCF. We are heading into the SKNIS Human Rights Defenders Week workshop in April 7th to 10th, and then we're heading into GCIS. But we're going to start our local campaign. You're going to see it all over about GCIS. And we rightly could not bring people here knowing that we didn't ban single-use plastics. So we have.
Okay.
I think it's going to be sobering. I think it's going to be sobering for Kittitians and Nevisians. It's going to be sobering for the ministries. It's going to be sobering for the cabinet members. It's going to be sobering, again, to solidify in a tangible way that we're not just talking the talk. And I think bringing all the sustainable actions that have been happening in silos into one place will solidify for us that we are on the right path, we are doing it, and what we're doing will stand the test of time for my son, for her niece, for our parents, for St. Kitts and Nevis.
And just quickly, Minister, you mentioned milestone 3. What's that?
So we have presented to St. Kitts and Nevis the intention to become a sustainable island state. And for us, we are marking our transition in milestones. Milestone 1 was the expression of the vision by our Prime Minister and by our respective ministers, and that was done internationally, regionally, locally. Milestone 2 was engagement with our youth at our National Youth Forum last year. Milestone 3, coincidentally, is going to be a media presentation, because we believe that the only way that we could advance this agenda is to have media partners. So it's a presentation to the media community on what everything about Sustainable Island State, our flagship projects, our investment portfolio, our everything even as basic as this is our logo, this is how we speak about sustainability, this is what health and social protection means when you incorporate citizen security, living with dignity, aging with dignity. And once the media understands even more and appreciates it, the messaging continues organically, and so that's a key milestone for us, and Prime Minister will be leading that agenda and sharing it with 300 plus participants, local and global, as well as the media.
How many more milestones?
As many as are needed to show the message gets out.
Okay.
But that was a critical one.
Okay, so we look forward to learning a lot more about GSIS and engaging in the campaign, educating ourselves, and seeing where we can participate as well. So when I say we, I'm not speaking about myself and SKNIS, but of course I'm speaking as a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, and so that's certainly something that we look forward to. And with that, unfortunately, we are out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. Ms. Levine and Minister Clarke, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of InFocus.
Definitely our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for being with us as well. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time. It's InFocus, your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.